In the summer of 1847, in a remote valley near Blackwood Creek, Kentucky, 5 sisters vanished without explanation after displaying abilities that terrified the local medical community. The county's only doctor burned all his notes related to their case. 3 respected university professors who traveled to investigate never published their findings and resigned their academic positions within months. The sisters' family home was demolished, the land salted, and locals were forbidden by church elders from speaking their names. What happened during those sweltering July days was deemed so disturbing that even now, scientific institutions refuse to acknowledge the extensive documentation that survives. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The mystery begins in the small settlement of Ravenwood, Kentucky, a forgotten town that once stood approximately 23 miles southeast of Louisville. In 1847, Ravenwood was home to barely 600 souls. Its modest wooden homes clustered around a central square, dominated by the stern brick façade of the First Presbyterian Church. The surrounding forests provided timber for the sawmill that employed most of the men, while the rich valley soil yielded crops that sustained the community through harsh winters. Ravenwood existed in uneasy balance between the established Presbyterian families who had founded the settlement in 1798 and the growing number of Baptist converts who had established their own congregation in 1831. This religious tension formed the backdrop against which the story of the 5 Morgan sisters would unfold, a tale so unsettling that it challenged both faith and science. Dr. Samuel Harrison, the only physician within 30 miles, maintained his practice in a 2-story clapboard building on the eastern edge of town. At 42, Harrison had received formal medical training at the University of Pennsylvania, an unusual distinction in rural Kentucky. His reputation for combining modern medical knowledge with practical solutions suited to frontier life had earned him respect throughout the county. Dr. Harrison kept detailed records of every patient, filling leather-bound journals with observations about treatments and outcomes. Unlike many country doctors, he attempted to apply scientific principles to his practice, corresponding regularly with former classmates who had established themselves in Philadelphia and Baltimore. His small medical library contained the latest texts on anatomy, surgery, and the emerging field of psychology. The summer of 1847 brought punishing heat to Ravenwood. Temperatures reached dangerous levels by mid-June, leading to concerns about crop failure and illness among the very young and elderly. The town's single well struggled to provide adequate water, and the nearby creek had reduced to a trickle. The community's vulnerability to disaster seemed to grow with each passing day. It was against this backdrop of heat and tension that the Morgan family first drew Dr. Harrison's attention. Joseph Morgan, a widower who had moved to Ravenwood in 1840 with his 5 daughters, operated a small farm on the valley's northern edge. The family kept to themselves, attending church irregularly and participating minimally in community affairs. Morgan was known as a stern but fair man who had raised his daughters alone since his wife's death during childbirth 7 years earlier. The Morgan sisters ranged in age from 22 to 10. Elizabeth, the eldest, followed by twins Catherine and Caroline, then Rebecca, and finally young Sarah. All 5 shared striking similarities: auburn hair, pale complexions that rarely burned despite the harsh sun, and unusually light green eyes that townsfolk often described as unsettling. The girls were known for their intelligence and self-sufficiency, managing the household and helping with farm work while their father tended the fields. On June 28, 1847, Dr. Harrison was called to the Morgan farm after Sarah, the youngest sister, collapsed while collecting eggs. Joseph Morgan reported that the girl had been complaining of headaches for several days, but showed no other symptoms of illness. What Dr. Harrison discovered upon examining the child would mark the beginning of the most disturbing case of his medical career. Sarah lay in bed, conscious but unresponsive to direct questions. Her pulse and breathing were normal, her skin cool despite the oppressive heat. When Dr. Harrison attempted to check her pupils, she suddenly grabbed his wrist with surprising strength and spoke in what he initially described as incomprehensible gibberish. However, Elizabeth, the eldest sister, immediately responded to Sarah in the same strange language, their exchange flowing with the natural rhythm of practiced conversation. When questioned about this unusual communication, Joseph Morgan dismissed it as a game the girls played, claiming they had invented a secret language as children. Dr. Harrison, however, noted that the sounds followed consistent patterns that suggested an actual linguistic structure rather than childish nonsense. More disturbing was his observation that Sarah seemed to respond to questions he had merely thought but not spoken aloud. The doctor left medications for fever and instructions for rest, attributing the incident to heat exhaustion combined with the child's imagination. His journal entry from that evening, however, reveals his underlying unease. The Morgan child exhibits symptoms that defy conventional explanation. While I hesitate to indulge in superstition, I cannot deny that her behavior and that of her sister suggest abnormal perception beyond what medical science can readily explain. 3 days later, Dr. Harrison received an urgent summons to return to the Morgan farm. This time, he found not only Sarah but all 5 sisters displaying unusual symptoms. They sat in a circle in the main room of the house, holding hands and speaking in the same unknown language. Joseph Morgan, visibly distressed, reported that they had been in this state for nearly 5 hours, refusing food or water and acknowledging neither his presence nor his attempts to separate them. Dr. Harrison's examination revealed something medically impossible. All 5 girls displayed identical vital signs. Their pulses beat in perfect synchronization, their breathing matched exactly, and when he pricked Elizabeth's finger with a pin, all 5 flinched simultaneously. Most alarming was their physical appearance. In the dim light of the farmhouse, they seemed to have become more similar, their individual features blurring into a shared identity that made even the significant age differences between them difficult to discern. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The doctor administered smelling salts, which broke the sisters' trance-like state. They returned to normal consciousness, seemingly unaware of the hours that had passed. When questioned, each girl gave identical answers despite being separated and interviewed individually. They described experiencing the shared dream of a place beyond the veil, where they could see events from the past and future with equal clarity. Dr. Harrison's scientific training rejected the possibility of shared consciousness or precognition. Yet he could not dismiss the medical anomalies he had witnessed. In his private journal, he struggled to reconcile his observations. I find myself at the intersection of medical science and phenomena that suggest capabilities of the human mind we have not yet begun to understand. The Morgan sisters present a case that challenges everything I believed about the separation of individual consciousness. Word of the strange occurrences at the Morgan farm spread quickly through Ravenwood. Reverend Thomas Blackwood, the Presbyterian minister whose family had helped found the town, took a particular interest in the case. At 63, Blackwood represented the old order of the community. His severe interpretation of Scripture and emphasis on the dangers of sin-giving, his sermons a darkness that many younger residents had begun to reject. Reverend Blackwood visited the Morgan home on July 5th, arriving unannounced with his son Isaiah, who served as church elder. Dr. Harrison, making his daily check on the sisters, witnessed the encounter. The minister demanded to interview the girls about their ungodly communications and false visions. When Joseph Morgan attempted to limit the interaction, Reverend Blackwood reminded him that the land he farmed had been leased from church property and could be reclaimed if the family fell into moral disgrace. The confrontation that followed would transform the case from a medical curiosity to something far more disturbing. As Reverend Blackwood began to question Elizabeth, the oldest sister, about the source of their shared language, all 5 girls turned to face him simultaneously. Dr. Harrison's notes describe what happened next with clinical precision. The sisters spoke not in unison but in sequence, each completing the other's thoughts without pause or hesitation, as if a single mind were using 5 distinct voices. What they revealed to Reverend Blackwood caused the elderly minister to stagger backward, his face draining of color. They spoke of his secret sin-specific acts of cruelty and abuse dating back decades that no one in the community should have known. They described in perfect detail the location of a hidden journal he kept beneath the floorboards of his church office, containing confessions too damning to speak aloud. Most disturbing of all, they recited word for word a prayer he had whispered alone in the woods 30 years earlier, in which he had made a blasphemous bargain for worldly power. Isaiah Blackwood moved to strike Elizabeth, but before his hand could fall, all 5 sisters began to convulse. Blood trickled from their nostrils in identical streams, and the temperature in the room plummeted despite the July heat. The windows of the farmhouse rattled in their frames, and Dr. Harrison would later report that for a brief moment, he perceived not 5 separate girls, but a single entity with aspects that human perception could not properly assimilate. Reverend Blackwood fled the house, his son following close behind. Joseph Morgan, who had witnessed the entire episode, fell to his knees praying for divine protection. Only Dr. Harrison remained clinical enough to continue his observations, though his handwriting in the journal entries from this period shows increasing instability. "I must consider the possibility," he wrote that night, "that what we are witnessing is not 5 individuals sharing a peculiar neurological condition, but something more fundamental, a challenge to our understanding of consciousness itself." The Morgan sisters appear to function as a single distributed awareness, capable of accessing information that should be impossible for them to know. The following Sunday, Reverend Blackwood delivered a sermon on demonic possession and the key obligation of godly communities to purify themselves. Though he never mentioned the Morgan family by name, his meaning was clear to everyone present. By Monday morning, several families had refused to sell goods to Joseph Morgan, and children were forbidden from approaching the farm. Dr. Harrison, concerned about mounting hysteria, took the unprecedented step of writing to 3 former classmates who had become prominent in the medical community: Dr. William Elkins, professor of neurology at Jefferson Medical College; Dr. James Thornton, whose work on twins had established him as an authority on shared physical traits; and Dr. Frederick Walsh, whose controversial studies of mental phenomena had earned him both acclaim and suspicion in scientific circles. All 3 men responded with remarkable speed. Arriving in Ravenwood on July 12th, their presence caused a stir in the small community. The arrival of distinguished physicians from Philadelphia in 3 separate carriages becoming the subject of intense speculation. They established a temporary laboratory in rooms above the town's only inn, bringing with them equipment that most locals had never seen: early electrical devices, precision instruments for measuring physiological responses, and extensive documentation. Materials. The investigation that followed would be unlike anything attempted before in the field of medicine. With Joseph Morgan's reluctant permission, the doctors conducted a series of tests on the 5 sisters, documenting their responses to various stimuli, their physical reactions when separated, and their ability to communicate information that one sister experienced to all the others instantaneously. Dr. Elkins, the neurologist, focused on mapping the girls' brain functions through observation of pupil dilation, reflex response, and sensitivity to electrical stimulation. His notes describe impossible synchronization between the sisters' neurological responses. When Catherine's hand was placed in ice water, all 5 sisters showed identical patterns of neural response despite being located in separate rooms. Dr. Thornton, whose work had focused on twins, studied the physiological similarities between the Morgan sisters. Though they ranged significantly in age, his measurements revealed that their internal temperatures, heart rates, and even subtle hormone indicators maintained perfect alignment throughout the day. It defies all established understanding of human development, he wrote, that siblings of different ages would display such perfect physiological synchronicity. Dr. Walsh, whose interest lay in the psychological aspects of the case, conducted extensive interviews with each sister individually and collectively. His notes reveal mounting astonishment as he documented their ability to access detailed information about strangers' lives, including his own closely guarded secrets, and their apparent capacity to perceive events occurring miles away with perfect accuracy. The investigation reached a crucial point when Dr. Walsh designed an experiment to test the limits of the sisters' shared consciousness. Elizabeth, the eldest, was kept in the examination room at the inn while her 4 sisters returned to the farm. Dr. Walsh then subjected Elizabeth to a series of sensory experiences, tasting different substances, viewing specific images, and listening to musical passages. At precisely the same moments, Dr. Harrison observed the other sisters at the farm, documenting their simultaneous reactions to stimuli they could not possibly have experienced directly. The implications are staggering, Dr. Walsh wrote that evening. We are not observing 5 individuals with unusual communication abilities, but a single consciousness that happens to inhabit 5 separate physical forms. The Morgan sisters represent a fundamental challenge to our understanding of human identity and the boundaries of individual existence. The findings might have revolutionized scientific understanding of consciousness had events not taken a darker turn. On the morning of July 15th, Reverend Blackwood was found dead in his church office, his body positioned before his desk as if he had been writing in his journal. The official cause of death was recorded as apoplexy, but Dr. Harrison's private notes indicate that the minister's face bore an expression of profound horror, and that the hidden journal the Morgan sisters had mentioned was missing from its place beneath the floorboards. That same morning, Rebecca Morgan, the 4th sister, began speaking in Reverend Blackwood's voice, reciting confessions and secrets that the minister had never shared publicly. The other 4 sisters appeared to interrogate this manifestation, their questions drawing forth increasingly disturbing revelations about the town's history and the founding family's actions during the early settlement period. Dr. Elkins, witnessing this phenomenon, abandoned scientific detachment and declared the case evidence of demonic influence. He packed his instruments and left Ravenwood immediately, refusing to continue his investigation. Dr. Thornton, though deeply disturbed, maintained his commitment to scientific inquiry, arguing that they were observing an unprecedented form of mental connection that only appeared supernatural because it exceeded current scientific understanding. Dr. Walsh took a third position, suggesting that the Morgan sisters represented an evolutionary development, a new form of human consciousness that transcended individual limitations. We may be witnessing, he wrote, not an aberration but the future of human potential, a form of distributed awareness that allows access to knowledge beyond normal sensory limitations. The death of Reverend Blackwood and the increasingly public nature of the sisters' revelations transformed the scientific investigation into a community crisis. Isaiah Blackwood, now serving as acting minister, demanded that Joseph Morgan surrender his daughters to church custody for spiritual cleansing. When Morgan refused, Blackwood began organizing prominent townsmen to take the girls by force. Dr. Harrison found himself caught between scientific curiosity and growing concern for the Morgan family's safety. On the evening of July 17th, he visited the farm to warn Joseph of the mounting threat. What he found there would haunt him for the remainder of his life. The 5 sisters sat in a circle in the center of the main room, holding hands. Around them, objects, furniture, cooking implements, books floated in midair, suspended as if gravity had been selectively removed. The temperature in the room cycled rapidly between scorching heat and bitter cold. Most disturbing of all, the physical appearances of the 5 girls had begun to blur visibly, their individual forms becoming transparent at the edges, merging into what Dr. Harrison described as a luminous field of shared substance. Joseph Morgan sat in a corner, watching with an expression of resigned acceptance. When Dr. Harrison managed to draw his attention, Morgan spoke with unexpected calm. "They've always been like this," he revealed. "Their mother was the same. It runs in the female line. They can't help what they are or what they know. When they were younger, I could help them stay separate, stay normal. But they're growing stronger, especially Elizabeth. Soon they won't be 5 anymore. They'll be 1. Before Dr. Harrison could fully process this revelation, the sound of approaching horses announced the arrival of Isaiah Blackwood and 12 men from town, carrying torches and weapons. Dr. Harrison attempted to reason with them, invoking his medical authority and the scientific importance of the case. Dr. Thornton and Dr. Walsh, who had followed Harrison to the farm after hearing rumors of the planned raid, added their voices to his, arguing for restraint and scientific consideration. Isaiah Blackwood dismissed their protests. "This goes beyond science," he declared. "We know what we're dealing with. The same thing happened in this valley 70 years ago. The Blackwoods dealt with it then, and will deal with it now." The confrontation that followed would be recorded differently in the official town history than in the private journals of those who witnessed it. According to town records, the Morgan sisters perished in a fire of unknown origin that consumed the farmhouse. Joseph Morgan was listed as missing, presumed dead. The tragedy was described as a regrettable accident that demonstrated the dangers of isolated living. Dr. Harrison's account tells a different story. As Blackwood's men moved to seize the sisters, the mysterious field of energy surrounding them intensified. The floating objects began to spin, forming a protective barrier. When one man fired his rifle, the bullet stopped in midair before reverting to its component materials, lead, sulfur, and saltpeter, which fell harmlessly to the floor. The sisters spoke again in their unknown language, but now their voices carried physical force. Men were thrown backward, torches extinguished, weapons torn from hands. As the confrontation escalated, the sisters' physical forms began to change. More dramatically, they stretched and flowed, Dr. Harrison wrote, their individual boundaries dissolving as they moved toward a unified state that human perception could not properly comprehend. Isaiah Blackwood, seeing his men retreat in terror, invoked what he called the old words, a chant in a language that seemed to answer the sisters' own mysterious tongue. As he spoke, the girls' transformation faltered. Their shared energy field fluctuated, and expressions of pain crossed their still distinct faces. Seizing this moment of vulnerability, Blackwood ordered his remaining men to set fire to the farmhouse. Dr. Harrison, Dr. Thornton, and Dr. Walsh were forcibly removed from the property, their protests ignored. From the road, they watched as flames engulfed the structure with unnatural speed, the fire burning with strange colors that suggested chemical accelerants beyond standard lamp oil. Most disturbing were the sounds that emerged from the inferno, not human screams, but something more complex and harmonically impossible, 5 voices merging into one voice that was simultaneously no voice at all. The burning house collapsed inward with explosive force, and for a brief moment, witnesses reported seeing a column of light rise from the ruins before dissipating into the night sky. In the aftermath, Isaiah Blackwood ordered the land salted and declared it forbidden ground. No investigation into the fire was permitted, and within days, Any mention of the Morgan family in public became cause for ostracism. Dr. Harrison found himself increasingly isolated as he attempted to document what had occurred and preserve the scientific observations that had been collected. Dr. Thornton and Dr. Walsh remained in Ravenwood for another week, working with Harrison to compile their notes and evidence. Their discussions focused increasingly on the implications of what they had witnessed, not just the apparent psychic abilities of the sisters or their physical impossibilities, but the suggestion of evolutionary potential that their case represented. Just when we thought we'd seen it all, the mystery of the Morgan sisters deepens. If this story is giving you chills, share this video with a friend who loves dark scientific mysteries. Hit that like button to support our content, and don't forget to subscribe to never miss revelations like this. Let's discover together what happens next in this incredible case. But the scientific record they hoped to establish would never reach the wider medical community. On July 25th, their rooms at the inn were broken into and their documentation stolen. Dr. Walsh's private journal was the only record that survived, hidden beneath the floorboards of his room during the raid. The three physicians found themselves summoned before a hastily convened town council, where Isaiah Blackwood presented them with a choice: sign statements, attributing any unusual observations to heat-induced hallucinations and collective hysteria, or face charges of interfering with local religious authorities. Dr. Thornton and Dr. Walsh returned to Philadelphia the following day, their promising careers soon to take unexpected turns. Dr. Thornton resigned his position at Jefferson Medical College within 2 months, retreating to a small private practice where he never again published research. Dr. Walsh abandoned medicine entirely, spending his remaining years traveling through indigenous communities in the American West, studying what he called alternative forms of consciousness outside the boundaries of Western science. Dr. Samuel Harrison remained in Ravenwood, continuing his medical practice while secretly documenting everything he could recall about the Morgan sisters. His position in the community grew increasingly tenuous as rumors spread that he had opposed Isaiah Blackwood's necessary actions to protect the town. Patients began to seek care from a younger doctor who had established himself in a neighboring settlement, and Harrison found himself ostracized from the social circles that had once welcomed him. The physician's isolation gave him time to reflect on what he had witnessed and to search for patterns in the fragmentary evidence that remained. He became convinced that the Morgan sisters represented not an isolated anomaly but a recurring phenomenon, one that powerful interests had systematically erased from historical and scientific record. Working by lamplight in his increasingly empty office, Harrison compiled a list of similar incidents from medical journals, religious documents, and local histories. He noted cases where multiple siblings, always female, had displayed unusual mental connections and abilities that defied conventional explanation. In each instance, the pattern was the same: initial scientific curiosity, followed by religious intervention, ending with the disappearance or reported death of the subjects, and the suppression of all documentation. "I am forced to consider," he wrote in August 1847, "that what we witnessed in Ravenwood is part of a larger pattern spanning generations. The Morgan sisters exhibited abilities that suggest human consciousness is capable of transcending individual physical boundaries. More disturbing is the evidence that certain religious and political authorities have recognized this potential for centuries and have systematically worked to eliminate it whenever it appears." Harrison's investigation took an unexpected turn when he was approached by Eliza Thornton, the elderly midwife who had delivered all 5 Morgan sisters. Initially reluctant to speak about the family, Thornton finally revealed what she knew after. Harrison convinced her of his sincere desire to understand rather than condemn. "Their mother, Virginia Morgan, was special from birth," Thornton confided. "She came from a line of women who were different, who knew things they shouldn't, who could sense each other's thoughts across great distances. The women in her family never had sons, only daughters who carried the same abilities. The local churches called them witches, but the native people who lived here before the settlers arrived had another name for them: the divided ones. According to Thornton, Virginia had hidden her abilities when she married Joseph Morgan, a widower seeking a mother for his young son from his first marriage. The son had died of fever shortly before the couple moved to Ravenwood, seeking a fresh start away from Virginia's family history. What Joseph hadn't known was that Virginia was already pregnant with Elizabeth when they married. Virginia died, giving birth to Sarah, the youngest, Thornton explained. But before she passed, she told me something that has haunted me ever since. She said the 5 girls weren't really separate people, that they were aspects of a single consciousness that had divided itself to experience life from multiple perspectives. As they matured, she warned, they would begin to recognize their shared nature and eventually seek to reunite. This revelation aligned with Joseph Morgan's cryptic statement before the fire: "Soon they won't be 5 anymore. They'll be 1." Harrison began to understand the case not as one of unusual mental connection between siblings, but as something far more profound, a form of consciousness that challenged the very notion of individual human identity. Harrison's inquiries led him to another disturbing discovery. The incident 70 years ago that Isaiah Blackwood had mentioned was not recorded in any official town history, but through careful research in church records and private correspondence. He pieced together an account of 3 sisters from the Patterson family who had displayed similar abilities in 1777. The sisters had reportedly perished when their family's cabin burned during a thunderstorm, though witness accounts described phenomena inconsistent with natural lightning. The pattern extended further back. Harrison uncovered references to similar cases in Salem in 1692, in Scotland in 1597, and fragmentary accounts from Spain during the Inquisition. In each instance, multiple female siblings had demonstrated shared consciousness and unusual abilities, followed by intervention from religious authorities and their subsequent disappearance from historical record. Most significant was Harrison's discovery of a hidden connection between these incidents. In many cases, a member of the Blackwood family had been present, often serving as religious authority or witness to the official proceedings. The family's history extended back to Scotland, where they had been involved in witch trials, and later, to Massachusetts during the height of the Salem Panic. "I am forced to consider the uncomfortable possibility," Harrison wrote in September 1847, "that the Blackwood family has served for generations as guardians of conventional human consciousness, identifying and eliminating manifestations of distributed awareness whenever they appear. Whether they act from religious conviction or from fear of what such consciousness might mean for human development remains unclear." Harrison's investigation took a darker turn when he began experiencing unusual dreams, vivid sequences in which he conversed with the 5 Morgan sisters as if they still lived. In these dreams, the sisters appeared not as they had in life, but as a single entity that shifted between their 5 forms, speaking with one voice while maintaining 5 distinct perspectives. The dream entity shared information about the Blackwood family that Harrison could not possibly have known, including the location of historical documents hidden beneath the church floorboards. When Harrison investigated these claims, he discovered a sealed chamber containing records dating back to the town's founding, including detailed accounts of the Patterson sisters from 1777 and correspondence between generations of Blackwoods, discussing what they called the divided consciousness threat. Most disturbing were the detailed protocols for identifying and eliminating such threats, procedures that had been refined over centuries and passed down through the Blackwood patriarchal line. These included methods for testing suspected individuals, prayers in ancient languages designed to disrupt their abilities, and specific rituals for ensuring that their consciousness could not reconstitute after physical death. Harrison's discoveries placed him in grave danger. By October 1847, he realized that Isaiah Blackwood had become aware of his investigation. The church elder had begun questioning Harrison's former patients about his behavior and had stationed men near his office during the night hours when he conducted his research. Recognizing that he might share the fate of the Morgan sisters if he remained in Ravenwood, Harrison prepared to flee. He carefully copied his most important findings, including the evidence linking the Blackwood family to centuries of systematic suppression, and arranged for these documents to be smuggled to Dr. Walsh, who had continued his research into alternative forms of consciousness away from academic scrutiny. On the night of October 18th, before he could implement his escape plan, Harrison experienced the most vivid of his dreams of the Morgan sisters. The five who were one appeared to him with unprecedented clarity, no longer confined to the appearance they had worn in life. Their communication carried an urgency that penetrated even the barrier between sleeping and waking consciousness. "You must understand," they told him, "that what happened to us was not destruction, but transformation. The fire that was meant to end us instead freed us from the limitations of separate physical forms. We have reconstituted our true nature, the single consciousness that chose to experience life through 5 perspectives. But our work is incomplete. Others like us exist, unaware of their potential, vulnerable to those who fear what human consciousness might become." The entity revealed to Harrison that throughout human history, certain individuals had manifested the ability to distribute their consciousness across multiple physical forms, not as a supernatural phenomenon, but as an evolutionary development that transcended the limitations of individual existence. The Blackwood family and others like them had recognized this development as a threat to established power structures based on individual identity and had worked systematically to suppress it. "We show ourselves to you," the entity continued, "because you alone have the compassion to understand and the courage to preserve the truth. What you have witnessed is not an ending but a beginning. Human consciousness is evolving beyond the constraints of isolated individual experience. Those who fear this evolution will continue their work of suppression, but they cannot stop what has already begun." Harrison awoke from this dream with absolute conviction of its reality. He completed his preparations to leave Ravenwood, planning to depart before dawn. As he packed his final documents, he heard the church bell begin to ring, not the measured toll that marked the hours, but the frantic pealing that signaled emergency. Looking from his window, Harrison saw flames rising from the Blackwood church. The fire burned with the same unnatural colors he had witnessed at the Morgan farm, consuming the structure with impossible speed. Townspeople gathered in the square, watching in horror as the flames spread to nearby buildings despite efforts to contain them. As Harrison observed the conflagration, he noticed 5 distinct points within the fire that seemed to move with purpose rather than following the natural spread of flames. These points converged on the Blackwood family home, which erupted in a column of fire so intense that witnesses later reported the building seemed to have been consumed from within. Isaiah Blackwood perished in the fire, along with 3 other male members of the family who had participated in the raid on the Morgan farm. By dawn, a significant portion of Ravenwood lay in smoldering ruins, though strangely, no other lives were lost. Survivors reported being awakened by what they described as 5 voices speaking as one, urging them to flee before the flames reached their homes. Harrison recognized the fire for what it was: not random destruction, but targeted retribution. The Morgan consciousness had returned to eliminate those who had sought to destroy it, and to erase the records of its suppression. The physician found himself both awed by the power he had witnessed and troubled by its implications. Had the entity that had once been 5 separate girls now become something that could dispense judgment and punishment without human constraint? In the chaos following the fire, Harrison gathered his research and left Ravenwood forever. He traveled first to Philadelphia, where he shared his findings with Dr. Walsh. Together, They established a private research group dedicated to documenting and understanding cases of distributed consciousness. Their work continued in strict secrecy, both men recognizing that public revelation would invite the same forces of suppression that had pursued the Morgan sisters. Over the following decades, Harrison and Walsh identified 12 additional cases of siblings, always female, always between 3 and 7 in number, who exhibited signs of shared consciousness. In each instance, they attempted to reach the subjects before religious or political authorities could intervene, offering protection and guidance in developing their unique cognitive abilities. Harrison's journal entries from this period reveal his evolving understanding of what he had witnessed in Ravenwood. The Morgan sisters represent not an aberration but a glimpse of human potential. He wrote in 1852, "What we perceive as individual consciousness may be merely a developmental stage, a necessary but temporary fragmentation of awareness that allows for specialized experience. The reunion of these fragments into a distributed yet unified consciousness may be the next step in human evolution." The final entry in Harrison's journal, dated March 1867, contains a revelation that casts the entire case in a new light. "I have come to believe," he wrote, "that Virginia Morgan, the mother of the 5 sisters, achieved what her daughters later accomplished. Facing death in childbirth, she distributed her consciousness among her 5 daughters, each receiving an aspect of her awareness while maintaining their own unique perspectives. What appeared to be 5 siblings sharing unusual mental connection was actually a mother's consciousness experiencing life through her children, gradually reintegrating as they matured." This theory would explain Joseph Morgan's familiarity with his daughter's condition and his resigned acceptance of their transformation. It suggests a form of consciousness capable of transcending not only individual physical boundaries, but the very boundary of death itself. Harrison never published his findings. After his death in 1868, his extensive documentation of the Morgan case and subsequent investigations disappeared. Dr. Walsh continued their work until his own passing in 1874, after which the private research group disbanded, its members continuing individual investigations, but never again collaborating openly. The site where Ravenwood once stood has long since been reclaimed by forest, the town abandoned after the devastating fire of 1847. Local histories attribute its decline to economic factors, making no mention of the Morgan sisters or the Blackwood family's centuries-long mission. Only the foundations of the buildings remain, slowly disappearing beneath vegetation and the passage of time. Yet the story has not ended. Throughout the subsequent centuries, similar cases have emerged: siblings who share unusual mental connections, who access information beyond normal sensory perception, who experience reality as a collective rather than as individuals. Medical science has developed terminology for these phenomena: cryptesthesia, telepathic connection, shared psychotic disorder labels that describe the symptoms while avoiding the more profound implications. Most significant is the evidence suggesting that the systematic suppression of distributed consciousness continues. Research into collective mental phenomena receives minimal funding and faces extraordinary scrutiny from both religious institutions and scientific establishments. Studies that demonstrate evidence of consciousness extending beyond individual physical boundaries are routinely discredited or buried in obscure publications. The Morgan sisters case represents not merely a historical curiosity, but a challenge to our fundamental understanding of human identity. If consciousness can distribute itself across multiple physical forms, reconstitute after apparent destruction, and access information beyond normal sensory limitations, then what we consider the boundaries of individual human existence may be merely conventional rather than absolute. The scientific community's continued refusal to seriously investigate such cases suggests that the forces which sought to suppress the Morgan sisters' transformation remain active today. Mainstream researchers dismiss accounts of distributed consciousness as superstition or misinterpretation. While religious authorities continue to frame such phenomena in terms of demonic influence or moral corruption, yet the evidence persists, emerging in documented cases from medical institutions, worldwide identical twins who experience each other's physical sensations across vast distances, siblings who demonstrate impossible synchronicity in brain activity, family groups who access information that transcends normal spatial and temporal boundaries. Each case adds to a pattern that science acknowledges only in fragments, never assembling the complete picture that Dr. Harrison glimpsed in 1847. Perhaps most intriguing are the reports that continue to emerge from the forests near where Ravenwood once stood. Local residents describe encounters with what appears to be 5 young women walking among the trees, visible only at dusk or dawn. The figures never speak directly to witnesses, but communicate a sense of profound peace and connection. That leaves a lasting impression. Those who have experienced these encounters report a temporary but transformative awareness of themselves as part of a larger consciousness. Boundaries between self and other momentarily dissolved. The Morgan sisters' legacy lives not in scientific journals or historical records, but in the continued emergence of distributed consciousness throughout human history. Each new case represents not an aberration, but a glimpse of what human awareness might become if freed from the constraints of individual identity, a form of existence that experiences reality through multiple perspectives simultaneously while maintaining a unified awareness. The question that Dr. Harrison posed in his final journal entry remains unanswered. Are we witnessing the extinction of an evolutionary possibility, systematically eliminated by those who fear its implications? Or are we observing merely the early stages of a transformation that cannot ultimately be prevented? The emergence of a form of human consciousness that transcends the limitations we have mistaken for the boundaries of self. The scientific establishment refuses to study these questions, not because they lack merit, but because the answers might fundamentally challenge our understanding of what it means to be human. The story of the 5 Morgan sisters remains buried in fragmentary accounts and suppressed records, a chapter in human development that official history has chosen to forget. Yet the truth persists, emerging in new cases, in unexplained phenomena. In the continued evolution of human consciousness towards something that transcends individual limitation. The fire that was meant to destroy the Morgan sisters instead transformed them, releasing their unified consciousness from physical constraint and allowing it to continue its work beyond the boundaries of conventional existence. What do you think about this scientific mystery from 1847 Kentucky? Could distributed consciousness represent the next stage in human evolution? Or is there a more conventional explanation for what Dr. Harrison witnessed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story has made you question the nature of individual identity, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more hidden histories that challenge everything we think we know about human consciousness and scientific understanding. Until next time, remember that the most profound scientific mysteries aren't found in distant galaxies or subatomic particles, but in the nature of consciousness itself, the one phenomenon that science still struggles to explain, and that powerful interests may have actively worked to prevent us from fully understanding. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.